Hi, Rama. It's week 14, day 2 of our Bible narrative reading plan. Today we are in Judges 13 and 14, and we see the beginning of the story of Samson. Now, Samson is one of those famous characters in the Bible that most people are familiar with, regardless of whether or not they're a Christian, regardless of whether or not they've even actually read the Bible, they are familiar with Samson. Samson is portrayed and depicted in songs and in pop culture and in movies and all these sorts of allusions to the story of Samson. It's one of those examples where the Bible and Christianity has influenced the culture around us, and so most people are familiar with this story of Samson. But as we read through it, I hope we'll take a closer look and see exactly who this man Samson is. Again, he's someone that we often we teach in children's Sunday school because it's an interesting story, and we want to figure out some way of emulating Samson to try to figure out his good qualities. And as we see and have already seen in the book of Judges, Samson is another person in a long list of judges in this book that is not quite the picture of faith that we are aspiring to. We can be thankful for all of the good that the Lord accomplished through Samson, and we can praise him where the scriptures praise him, but we can also be careful readers, pay close attention to who Samson really was, and make note of his character and learn from what the scriptures actually say about this man named Samson. We see his birth here in chapter 13. We're told of the story of his parents. His father, Manoah. Samson's mother, Manoah's wife, is not named. But we have this appearance by the angel of the Lord, who again, as we understand, is a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ. In some way that we can't fully wrap our minds around, God the Son appears to these people here in the book of Judges. And it's so interesting that it happens frequently in the book of Judges, in the midst of such a dark book of a full picture of human sin and human depravity, that it's in this context that the angel of the Lord appears so often in the book of Judges. And it becomes clear that this is indeed a representative of God. God himself is coming to speak to Manoah and to Manoah's wife about this child that they are going to have. And they're told that this child is to be set apart. He has a mission from the Lord, and he's going to live a different type of life. And so we see that here in chapter 13. Samson is born. At the end of the chapter, verse 24, it says, "The young man grew, and the Lord blessed him." So we have hopes. We are hopeful about this child named Samson. Who will he be? Will he be a good judge? Will he really deliver Israel? Well, we continue in chapter 14. The story speeds up. He's born, and now he's essentially grown. He goes down to Timnah, and there he sees one of the daughters of the Philistines. Now, we've already been told that the Philistines have conquered Israel. They have been oppressing Israel for, I believe, 40 years. It tells us there in chapter 13, verse 1. And so this is the enemy. Samson goes and he sees a daughter of the Philistines. He sees someone who belongs to the enemy, and yet he tells his parents, "I saw and I want. I saw one of the daughters of the Philistines. Now get her for me as my wife." And Samson's parents say to him, is there not someone of our own people, someone who's not an enemy, someone that you can marry among our own people, that you have to go to these uncircumcised people, these ungodly people? But Samson again says to his father, "Get her for me, for she is right in my eyes." I find that to be such an interesting phrase. As you read the end of the book of Judges, you see in that epilogue over and over and over, we're told that during this time there was no king of Israel, and everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Samson sees this girl, this daughter of the Philistines, this young woman, and she is right in his eyes, even though she's not right in the eyes of Samson's parents. And we know that God had already warned them over and over and over about intermarrying for the sake of protecting them against ungodliness. But in an interesting phrase, chapter 14, verse 4, his father and mother did not know that she was from the Lord. So again, in some interesting way, God is sovereign over all of this. Samson goes down to Timnah, verse 5, and then we have this interesting episode where a young lion comes at him. And the text says that the Spirit of the Lord rushes upon Samson, and although he had nothing in his hands, he tore the lion in pieces as one tears a young goat. Now this is fascinating for us Most of us have not torn a young goat with our bare hands, and we can't imagine what it's like to tear a lion with our bare hands. And so we understand why this is such a fascinating story, why it's a great story to tell in children's Sunday school, especially to young boys. I mean, it's just exciting, it's riveting, but somehow this is a sign that God's Spirit is on him. Now, he's a young man, he's not a child, he's a young adult. And even though this has happened to him, it says that he doesn't tell his parents about it, but he does go and talk with this woman, again, who was right in Samson's eyes. Now, we might run right past that, but there's more going on here than just a casual conversation. This was not culturally acceptable for him to go and just talk with her, someone he's not married to, a Philistine woman. And so we see already that Samson is going down this path, that even as the Spirit of the Lord is on him, he's doing things that are not in keeping with what the Lord would have him to do. It says, after some days he returned to take her. And he turns aside, he sees the carcass of the lion, there's a swarm of bees in there. He scrapes his hand, he gets the honey out, but he's not supposed to do this. He's taken this Nazirite vow. This is what the angel of the Lord has said. He's not supposed to touch dead bodies, but he does this. So yet again, we see in small ways, Samson is disobeying what God has told him to do. Now, Samson prepares a feast as he's preparing for marriage, and Samson tells these people, I want to give you a riddle. And if you can answer the riddle, I will give you all of these things, all these wonderful fine linens and fine clothing. And so he gives them a riddle based off of this episode with the lion and the carcass. And it says, and in 3 days they could not solve the riddle. But what happens? On the fourth day, the people go to Samson's wife, and they say, entice your husband to tell us what the riddle is. If you don't, we're going to burn you and your father's house with fire. And so these people are intimidating Samson's new bride, and they say, look, you need to go and convince him, get him to tell you the answer, and then you can tell us. Otherwise, we're going to do you great harm. Now, this foreshadows what's going to happen with Samson the rest of his life, that women are going to be his downfall, and that women are going to continually manipulate him and do terrible things to him, and yet this is Samson's pattern. This is what happens to him throughout his life. And so they do intimidate her. She does get the answer out of Samson, and Samson finds out about it. And what does it say that he does? Verse 19, the Spirit of the Lord rushes upon him, and he goes down to Ashkelon and strikes down 30 men of the town and took their spoil and gave the garments to those who had told the riddle. In hot anger, he went back to his father's house. And don't miss this, at the end of verse 20, Samson's wife was given to his companion who had been his best friend. Oh my goodness, so much is happening in this verse. Somehow, in the providence of God, the Spirit of the Lord is on Samson, allows him this great defeat because God is still about the work of conquering Israel's enemies. Even as Israel is sinning, Israel is doing terrible things, God is still being faithful to his promises, and he's using sinful, imperfect people. That's all he has to work with. We're all sinful, imperfect people. And so Samson has this great victory, but we're told that Samson's wife is given away. Now, Samson's father-in-law has no business doing this. There's no reason for him to think that Samson is not going to return from battle. But we see yet again this strange relationship with the Philistines, and it's going to continue to pop up as Samson has married a Philistine woman. The Philistines have intimidated his wife, and now his Philistine father-in-law has given his wife away to his best man. What a mess all of this is. Yet we still see God's faithfulness using sinful, messy people. Here's the summary of today's reading. For more information, go to tunemyheart.org.